We're in the 7 o'clock hour, folks. We got about 53 minutes before we have to get out of here. Rev, I saw this story, and it really. I mean, these type of stories always come out. They're really hard to grasp because of the implications for our community.
Uh-huh.
But it's important to talk about this because it is so important for our health in our communities. Type 2 diabetes
Yeah.
is soaring among Black and Latino youth in this country. Um, Type 2 diabetes, like for the number of you young people under the age of 20, listen to this, Rev, living with type 2 diabetes, increased by a staggering 95%, found the authors from the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA. A 95% among children and teens living with the illness, the highest number per 1,000 were Black and Native American, according to the study. But the type 2 diabetes is preventable, but it's often caused by carrying extra weight. So many of our kids are overweight. About 20% of children in this country, 20% of the children in America, Rev, are obese.
Which is interesting.
Wow.
That's interesting because here's another statistic for you to correlate that to.
Yeah.
About 80% of the American population lives in urban areas.
Right. And I think that has something to do.
Now, in some ways, because the that thought of the average person when they heard your statistic would be, well, these kids, they don't play outside like they used to.
Right.
They don't run around like they used to. They're always stuck inside.
Yep.
And looking at their video games.
Yep.
That's why it's going up but 20% of our children are obese and suffering from type 2 diabetes, but 80% of our children live in the same environment. 20% of 80%.
Right.
That means 80% of that 80% is not. So what is it that is peculiar to this 20%?
Right. You mean the 20%
that are suffering from diabetes? What is it that's different about them from the rest of their playmates and classmates who have the same pulls to play Roblox and Minecraft and all that stuff? What is the difference?
Well, let me say this. Obesity, if I'm not mistaken, is the absolute worst category, right? I believe overweight. So I wish I would have looked up the number of young people who are overweight, because I'm sure it'd be close to 50% if we're just talking about people who are overweight, 20% being obese. But what we're seeing in our particular communities, you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say you don't see kids running around anymore, and I was talking about that here. I think we were talking about this earlier in the summer when they first started those programs back up. With I believe when we talked to Sam Love, when Sam Love called in and talked about what they were trying to do in the community. But growing up in Miller, when I was growing up, me and my friends used to ride our bikes up and down the hills. And we would go play hoops, and we would always finding some crap to get into. Now, and the thing is, this was even during the video game era, because we played plenty of video games.
Right.
Okay, so this wasn't like the 70s or 60s or before home gaming really took off. This was the 90s. We played a lot of John Madden football on Sega, and we played a whole lot of NBA Live. We played a whole lot of NBA Jam and Mortal Kombat and all that stuff that everybody else our age is playing. But we found time to go ride our bikes and to go play basketball as well. Let me get this caller before they hang up on us. Hello, caller.
How you doing?
It's all good, brother. And you?
I was calling back. You speak in reference to black children, young black children having diabetes.
Yes.
You have to take into consideration also that when we were growing up, especially myself, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, we did a lot of walking.
Yeah.
Often.
Yep.
A lot of playing, a lot of walking. But today, these children, they don't walk to school. They got buses.
Right.
If you're not on the bus, they're riding cars.
Right.
In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were not a lot of cars. There were not a lot of people with cars. Now you drive up and down the street, you see 4 and 5 cars in people's driveways.
Yep.
People do not get that simple exercise, and that is, if nothing else, just walking. It was a thing for me from 21st Ohio, walking every morning to go to Roosevelt School and back.
Mm-hmm.
We used to walk to the Palace Theater to go to the show.
Right.
Everywhere we went, basically, we walked. And as children, we didn't have that problem as far as diabetes is concerned. But the biggest problem, like you say, is exercise and movement. Our children today do not engage in physical activities on the level that we did. And at the same time, we did not eat all the junk because that type of junk food was not being manufactured during the time that we were growing up. Today, you got all types of junk food that young kids are living off of.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I'm glad you actually brought that up because I actually saw this documentary some years ago where they talked about the high fructose corn syrup. In the 1970s, they started putting high fructose corn syrup in everything in the mid 70s, and immediately the obesity rates in America started to shoot up. Now the thing about high fructose corn syrup, it's in everything. It's in all the pop. It's in all the juice. It's in bread. It's in it's in like ketchup. It's in a large percentage of the thing. If you turn over if you go to your kitchen, your pantry or refrigerator and turn around and look at those ingredients, you're gonna see a lot of high fructose corn syrup in there, and you're gonna see a lot of preservative. You're gonna see a whole lot of dextrose and dextrose and natstrose as well.
Dextrose.
Right, and you're right. It didn't used to be that way. That's why a lot of people have actually started looking for Mexican Pepsi because Mexican Coca-Cola, because Mexican Coca-Cola is made with sugar, but not with the high fructose corn syrup, and there is a different taste when you make things like pop without the high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Well, like I said, the only back then our physical abilities to do various things involved in physical activity was a neutralizer. Mm-hmm. Today, there's no neutralizer that young people are involved in.
Right.
The farthest they walk is from the house to the car.
Okay, but what I'm wondering is, and I'm really looking seriously to try to find something on this.
Right.
If they're saying that 20% of kids are suffering with this,
mm-hmm.
but I know from population studies that 80% of our population lives in urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
So why is the number 20% instead of 60% or even 80% of our children?
Well, maybe it's genetic.
Yeah, genetics.
Maybe it's genetic. You have to look at every avenue. It's like you're talking about the COVID-19. COVID-19 does not affect everybody to the degree that it affects one person to the next. So it would have to be based upon the genetic makeup of various individuals.
I'm looking at something right now. Maybe, might I don't know, from the CDC. Obesity in youth ages 2 to 19 stood at 18.5% in 2016, affecting about 13.7 million children and adolescents. Hispanics and non-Hispanic black children had higher obesity rates at 25.8% and 22%, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that means that 80% of our children, approximately, are not obese, according to the CDC.
I mean, they still may be overweight, but they may not just be morbidly obese like the worst.
Obesity, well, excess weight is a contributing factor.
Right.
Now,
the excess weight goes back to lack of physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
When you stop. When I was growing up, and I'm going to say in the 70s, 60s, 70s, I looked at the old Soul Train show they used to have on TV. Mm-hmm. There were no obese people. People danced and partied. There was so much physical activity that as I think about it growing up in my own neighborhood, there were no fat people. And if you saw somebody fat, they really had a problem, a medical issue. It wasn't because they overate or they did this or that. I'm gonna let you guys go. This train is wearing me out.
Go ahead, brother.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Now, in this article that I'm looking at right now, interesting portion here. A sedentary lifestyle can be linked to socioeconomic status as well. In June 17, Sports Medicine found that among adolescents aged 10 to 19, lower socioeconomic status was associated with higher amounts of sedentary behavior, but only in high income countries such as the United States.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, lower socioeconomic status was associated with a higher amount of TV and screen time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a study published in 2017 found that teenagers aged 14 to 18 who perceived their neighborhoods as unsafe had a 21% reduced odds of being physically active on 5 or more days of the prior week compared to those who felt safe.
Mm.
Well, that makes sense.
Right.
If you're too scared to go outside because it's too dangerous, you're more likely to stay inside. And if at the same time you live in an urban area where there is access to cable television, you're more likely to avail yourself to that. And if your parents are thinking, look, we can't entertain these kids all day long. They're going to be talking about how they're bored they are. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get us a decent cable package at least,
Yeah.
and at least they'll be entertained. Then, yeah, you got together the perfect ingredients. But that also seems to indicate, because again, 20% versus 60 to 70% seems to indicate that somehow the group of those who are able to not be in this situation is much larger than those who are unable to avoid it.
Well, like I said, that's just the worst obesity. Like that's just you can be overweight without being obese.
True, because that's what I was going to get to. Because the whole way they measure having excess weight.
Because I'm just let me just say this really quick. This thing I just found on Google just says that 35% of all African American children between 2 and 19 are overweight. So about 40% are overweight. 20%, yeah. So
Yeah.
40% are overweight. Period, and half of that is the worst, which is obese.
Yeah, but here's the thing about that: the standards by which they measure
Yeah.
weight
Mm-hmm.
tend to make black people overweight.
What do you mean?
Well, when I was in the military, they went by the BMI, Body Measurement
Oh,
Index.
right. Okay, I've heard of that.
And generally speaking, your average black person was going to be over the limit
Mm-hmm.
because the BMI measurements, what they consider to be a good weight, like for example, it said for me, my ideal weight would be 155 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I would look like at 155 pounds?
A lot skinnier.
A lot skinnier.
Right.
I'd look like a poster child for UNICEF at 155 pounds.
Like I remember when Al Sharpton looked that way. Remember when Al Sharpton looked that way?
Yes.
And Al Sharpton, he looked sick ever since. And people was like, he said people walk up to him all the time and say, Reverend Al, you look sick. He's like, I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I was sick before. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people do. But the diabetes is killing us. The high blood pressure, the heart disease, and these types of things are definitely, becoming very prevalent with younger people in our community.
Some of this, I suspect, is related to our diet.
Yep.
I would argue that we're eating much more processed foods now. Our children are eating much more processed foods than we did. We had much more access to fresh vegetables, less processed meats, so forth. Our children are more likely to eat something that was heated up in a microwave and preserved by tons of chemicals than we were.
Right.
Because microwaves didn't exist when I was a kid.
They didn't?
No. We didn't have microwaves when I was a kid.
What?
No. If you wanted a quote unquote fast meal, you had to go into the freezer and get this thing from Swanson and you put it in the oven. And it tasted terrible.
I had no idea.
It was terrible. But it would be cooked in about 5 minutes, I think. But it tasted terrible.
Right.
So you had little inclination to buy that sort of stuff. A woman who wanted to be viewed as eligible would not allow it to be said that her ability to cook was dependent upon Swanson.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays it's common to have meals come from the microwave, and I imagine there's a lot of people that most of their meals come from fast food.
Yeah,
it's convenient.
We got another caller. Hello, caller.
Yeah, how you doing again?
It's all good, brother.
During a period of time that when we could start comparing from the 1980s going up and the 1980s going backwards, the time periods were so different.
Mm-hmm.
During those period of times, mothers were in the home.
Mm-hmm.
You had more mothers in the home that were actually cooking home cooked meals.
Yeah.
Now you've got most of the women are heads of households.
Right.
So therefore, those home cooked meals are not there. It's basically fast food and junk, which has bred a totally new generation of mothers that have actually produced different types of children.
Right.
You know, it's like I said, when I was growing up, I was the remote control in my family. When my parents wanted the channel change, I had to get up and go turn the channel.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays everything is a remote. Even if you want your fan turned on and off, remote. Everything is remoted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, even down to you comparing that with the microwave to the oven.
Right.
You know, everything has reduced the ability, should I say, physical ability of individuals.
Yeah.
If you stop and look at all the things that are manufactured today, it limits physical ability in the process of doing what you're doing.
Let me ask you something, brother.
Go.
Let me ask you something. Do you
Go
grill?
ahead.
Do you barbecue?
Do I barbecue?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
All right. What kind of grill do you use?
I've got a what do you call this? The side cooker where the wood burning or charcoal is a separate chamber.
Okay. Have you seen these grills that use the little pellets?
Yeah, I have.
Now, I've noticed something about them. They are designed so all you're supposed to do is pour in the pellets, put the meat on the grill, set the timer, and that's it.
Yeah.
No getting up to go check the meat.
No turning.
No check it. Check the whether the air needs to be closed off or opened up to raise or lower the temperature.
Right.
They are sold as being all you have to do is set it and forget it.
Yeah.
So what do you do while you're forgetting it?
Sitting down.
Sitting down.
Right.
And when the timer goes off, then you get up and go get your food.
Right.
You know, like I said, everything is being manufactured today that lessens your physical ability to move around.
Mm-hmm.
Almost, you name it, almost everything. Even down to the point, even when you're lying down now, you can get massage while you're lying down or sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is to keep you inactive.
Right. I agree with you, brother. We got to go to a break.
All right.
Thank you for your call.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll be right back after this on Issues and Answers on WLT 1371. Please give us a call, 219-885-1371.